The German lieutenant squinted through his field glasses, his breath fogging in the pre-dawn chill of the Luxembourg forest. He counted them again. 1, 2, 10, 20 M4 Sherman tanks, parked in a loose formation just inside the tree line, their long 76mm guns pointed menacingly toward the German lines. He could hear the rumble of their engines idling, the clank of treads, and the occasional shouted order of an American officer. He noted the divisional insignia on the vehicles, the red ball of the 6th Armored Division. He scribbled frantically in his notebook, the 6th Armored. Here, this meant the main American thrust was coming from this sector. He dispatched a runner immediately. Alert High Command. Patton's elite are massing south of us. Pull the 11th Panzer Division from the north to counter. What the lieutenant couldn't see, what his expensive Zeiss lenses couldn't reveal, was that the tank he was looking at was made of rubber. It weighed 93 pounds and was inflated by 4 men from the 603rd Camouflage Engineers. The rumble of their engines was a recording, blasted from a 500-pound speaker truck hidden in a ravine half a mile away. The shouted order was a specialist 4th grade from Brooklyn, holding a script. And the divisional insignia? It was painted on yesterday by an art student from the Pratt Institute. The real 6th Armored Division was, at that very moment, moving under radio silence 15 miles to the north, preparing for the actual breach. The 1,100 men of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, the Ghost Army, had just fooled the entire German 7th Army. And their only weapons were imagination, rubber, and sound. This is the story of the most elaborate, audacious, and creative deception in the history of the United States Army. It is the true account of a top-secret unit recruited not from West Point or the infantry, but from the art schools of New York, the advertising agencies of Madison Avenue, the sound stages of Hollywood, and the architecture firms of Chicago. They were painters, designers, actors, sound engineers, and press agents. And for one critical year, they became the phantom limb of the Allied war effort in Europe. Their official designation was the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. To the few American generals who knew of their existence, they were the Phantom Force. To themselves, they were simply the Ghost Army. Their story does not begin on a battlefield. It begins in a smoky room in London, where British intelligence officers, masters of the double-cross system, explained a concept called visual and sonic deception to skeptical American commanders. The British had used it with great success in North Africa, at El Alamein. The idea was simple. If you can't hide your armies, make the enemy think your armies are somewhere they are not. Make them waste bullets on phantoms. Make them defend the wrong hill. The Americans loved it. And in January 1944, at Camp Forest, Tennessee, the call went out. A call that baffled military recruiters. They weren't looking for marksmen. They were looking for men with high IQs and creative backgrounds. Private Arnie Glass, a lanky 22-year-old abstract painter from Brooklyn, stepped off the bus at Fort Knox, Kentucky, clutching a portfolio of his charcoal nudes. He had been pulled from basic training with no explanation. "The Army has a special project for you, Glass," his drill sergeant had barked, clearly disgusted. Arnie found himself in a barracks with men who looked nothing like soldiers. They were arguing about Picasso. One was sketching the supply sergeant in a notebook. Another was humming a complex musical score. This was the nascent 603rd Camouflage Engineers, the visual deception arm of the Ghost Army. Their commander, Colonel Harry L. Reeder, a stoic engineer, stood before his motley crew of bohemians. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice flat, "you have been selected for a unique mission. You are not here to fight. You are here to perform." Their basic training was surreal. Instead of learning to clear minefields, they learned how to paint shadows onto flat canvas to make it look like a building from 5,000 feet. Instead of qualifying on a .50 caliber machine gun, they qualified on a sewing machine, stitching together rubber panels. Their final exam was at Fort Knox. They were ordered to hide an entire airfield. When the inspection plane flew over the next day, the pilot radioed back in confusion, reporting that the coordinates were wrong. He was looking at an idyllic Kentucky farm, complete with a red barn, grazing cows, and a picket fence. All of it was canvas and plywood, built over the concrete runway. But hiding was only half the job. The real mission was impersonation. The unit was split into 3 parts. First was the 603rd, the visual wing. These were the artists, men like Bill Blass, who would later become a world-famous fashion designer, and Ellsworth Kelly, a future icon of minimalist painting. Their job was to create the props. They built a catalog of inflatable illusions, M4 Sherman tanks, 6x6 trucks, P-47 Thunderbolt fighter planes, L-5 artillery pieces. These infantry, as they called them, could be set up in hours. A platoon of 4 men could inflate a tank, camouflage it poorly, so it would be spotted by enemy reconnaissance, and then create fake tracks using a custom-made bulldozer attachment. From the air, a single platoon of artists looked like an entire armored battalion. The second part was the Sonic Wing, the 3132 Signal Service Company. These were the sound wizards, many recruited directly from RCA and Bell Labs. They spent months at Fort Knox and recorded the unique acoustic signature of every vehicle and unit in the U.S. Army. They captured the sound of an engineering battalion building a pontoon bridge, the distinct clatter of the 4th Armored Division's tanks versus the 6th's, the sound of soldiers digging foxholes, even the specific dialects and slang of different infantry divisions. These sounds were recorded on state-of-the-art wire recorders, a precursor to magnetic tape, mixed in a mobile studio and then blasted across the battlefield from massive speaker trucks. They could project the sound of a full division on the move for 15 miles. They created sonic scripts to be played at night. 1900, arrival of trucks. 2030, sounds of bulldozers digging in. 2200, arrival of artillery. 04, tanks massing for an attack. To a German sound-ranging unit, it was indistinguishable from a real invasion force. And the third part was the radio wing, the signal company. These radio operators were masters of mimicry. They learned to copy the fist, the unique tapping style, of radio operators from other divisions. They would arrive in an area, set up their transmitters, and begin a flood of fake radio traffic, all coded in the specific ciphers of the division they were impersonating, knowing full well the Germans were listening. The final piece of the puzzle was spoof, or atmosphere. This was pure theater. Men from the 23rd would drive trucks in endless loops, always changing drivers and stenciling new unit markers on the canvas covers. They would go into French towns, dressed as colonels and majors. They had a large supply of fake uniforms and insignia, and talk loudly in cafes about the big attack that was coming, knowing local informants would report it. They created fake command posts, fake generals' headquarters, and even fake laundry lines, hanging the specific divisional patches for German spies to see. In May 1944, they were shipped to England. Their existence, classified top secret. Not even the other GIs on the boat knew who they were. Their mission, to land in France after D-Day and become a traveling roadshow of deception, impersonating multiple divisions, confusing the Wehrmacht, and, most importantly, drawing German fire onto themselves, a unit of 1,100 men, to save the lives of 30,000. Their first test came just weeks after the Normandy landings. They landed in France not with a heroic charge, but in the quiet, chaotic aftermath of D-Day. They disembarked at Omaha Beach in early July 1944. The tide was out, revealing the miles of sand still littered with the terrible debris of the invasion. Wrecked landing craft, submerged tanks, waterlogged packs, and the personal, haunting flotsam of war. For Private Arnie Glass and the other artists of the 603rd Camouflage Engineers, it was a brutal awakening. They had trained for a year to imitate war. Now they were stepping over its genuine, rusting artifacts. The smell of death, diesel, and salt hung heavy in the air. Arnie clutched his M1 rifle, but his other hand instinctively gripped the sketchbook in his field pack. He saw a German .88 cannon, its long barrel pointed into the sky, a silent metal skeleton. He felt an intense, morbid urge to draw it,
On July 18th, Colonel Reeder gathered his officers. The 23rd, all 1,100 of them, were to move south of St. Lo. Their mission, to impersonate two full American infantry divisions, the 9th and the 30th, totaling over 30,000 men. They were to simulate a massive troop buildup, convincing the Germans that the main American assault was aimed directly at them, miles from the real target of Operation Cobra. "You are, for all intents and purposes, the 9th and 30th Divisions," Reeder told his men. His eyes scanned the faces of his artists, sound engineers, and radio ops. "You will hold a 20-mile front. You will make them look at you. You will draw their fire. Do not be mistaken, gentlemen. This show is real." The performance began that night. It was theater on a terrifying scale. The 603rd Camouflage Engineers moved into position under cover of darkness. This was an infantry show, so the inflatable Shermans stayed packed. Instead, they inflated 6x6 trucks, jeeps, and dozens of L5 artillery pieces. They parked them in apple orchards and along roadsides, covering them with camouflage nets, but just poorly enough that a German reconnaissance plane would spot the glint of metal, which was actually just the sheen of wet rubber, at dawn. Arnie Glass's team was assigned to dig in a fake command post. They spent all night stringing dummy telephone wires from tree to tree. They dug shallow, empty foxholes and threw the fresh earth on top to be visible from the air. They used the tank track bulldozer attachment to carve fake roads into the fields, as if heavy vehicles had just arrived. Meanwhile, the 3132 Signal Service Company set up their sonic trucks in a wooded ravine, safe from direct observation, but well within earshot of the German lines. The sonic script began at 0100. First, the recording of trucks arriving, shifting gears, and the muffled shouts of NCOs. Then, the distinct sound of an engineering battalion at work, the clang of shovels, the driving of posts, the rumble of bulldozers. The German sound ranging units, their microphones pointed into the darkness, would have picked it up and relayed it instantly. Americans digging in, heavy equipment, a major buildup. The spoof division, the actors, began their most dangerous work. They stitched the 9th Division's octafoil patch onto their uniforms. In broad daylight, they drove jeeps down roads that were under constant observation by German forward artillery spotters. They would drive to a command post, salute an empty tent, deliver fake orders, and drive back, only to change their helmet stencils and do it all again. In the nearby town of Carentan, a man who was a radio actor from Chicago 3 months prior, now wearing the silver eagles of a full colonel, walked into a cafe known to be frequented by locals, some of whom were German informants. He ordered a coffee and spoke loudly to his aide about the big push coming in this sector and how the 30th was moving up to support the 9th. The radio company operators, meanwhile, unleashed a torrent of fake traffic. They had studied the 9th Division's radio procedures for weeks. They knew their call signs, their daily routines, even the specific rhythm, the fist, of their best radio operators. They sent hundreds of messages, all carefully designed to be intercepted and decoded by the Germans, painting a picture of two full divisions preparing for an imminent, massive assault. The German response was exactly what the 23rd hoped for and dreaded. On the morning of July 19th, the German artillery opened up. Shells from their lethal 88mm guns and 105mm howitzers began to rain down on the positions the Ghost Army had so carefully faked. Arnie Glass huddled in a real foxhole as the ground shook. A shell screamed overhead and landed 100 yards away with a deafening crump right in the middle of a motor pool he had helped assemble. He peeked over the edge. Shrapnel had torn through 3 of his inflatable trucks. They weren't exploding, they were just wilting. They hissed and flopped over on their sides like dying animals. The shelling was terrifying, but it was also a sign of success. The Germans were wasting thousands of dollars of ammunition on 90-pound rubber decoys. For 2 days, the 1,100 men of the 23rd held the line, playing their parts with grim determination. The sound trucks broadcast the sound of artillery calibration fire, to which the Germans dutifully replied with Rio counter-battery fire. The radio nets chattered about ammo dumps and casualty collection points that didn't exist. Then, on July 25th, miles to the west, Operation Cobra began. While the Panzer Division remained fixed in place, nervously watching the 30,000 ghosts to their front, 2,500 American B-17s and B-24s dropped 60,000 tons of bombs on the German lines at Saint-Lô. The earth erupted. The German line didn't just break, it evaporated. Patton's armor poured through the gap. The breakout from Normandy had begun. The 23rd show was over. That night, as silently as they had arrived, they deflated their army. They packed their speakers, reeled in their dummy wires, and slipped into the darkness. When a German patrol finally crept forward to investigate the sudden silence, they found nothing but a field of empty holes, rapidly deflating trucks, and a few stray divisional patches. The 30,000 Americans had vanished into thin air. Operation Elephant was a stunning success. The 23rd had held a vital enemy force in check, saving countless lives in the real battle. But their victory was not without cost. During the operation, an artillery shell landed directly on a jeep carrying 3 men from the signal company. They were the Ghost Army's first casualties, the first men to die while defending an illusion. They had proven their concept. They had proven that art and sound could win a battle. But as they drove toward the front, their success had only made them more valuable. The High Command, now true believers, had a new, even more audacious mission for them. They were to head to the port city of Brest, where a besieged German garrison of 80,000 men was holding out. The 23rd was ordered to surround them. The problem? They were ordered to do it alone.